Earlier today, Senator Ruben Gallego joined us in studio. Senator Gallego, good to see you again. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Ted.
I'm curious. From a distance, it looks like mayhem back in Washington. What is the mood on Capitol Hill?
Well, look, I think legitimately there is mayhem, largely being caused by this administration. I think there is a want for bipartisanship. For certainly some of us in the Senate, Democrats and Republicans, we want to get working together in a manner that will benefit this country in the short term and long term. But what's happening at the administration really kind of disrupts all of that and really causes the chaos that you're seeing on TV and what people are feeling every day.
We're hearing some on the left saying Democrats in Congress on Capitol Hill not fighting back hard enough against the Trump administration. What's your response to that?
Look, I think the Democrats on the House and the Senate have been fighting at the level that we need to be at every step. Now, I think a lot of our compatriots wanted us to fight from day one. The sentiment of the American public and of Arizonans, who I have to answer to more so than a party, was they wanted us to give an opportunity to this presidency to see if there were some compromises, places that we could work together. And we did do that. And now we've seen, of course, that the president is outstripping the feelings and sentiments of the public, and we're fighting him at an appropriate place and time.
I want to get to some particular issues. Let's start with Medicaid, and because this has a lot of folks here in Arizona worried that this budget that looks for $880 billion in cuts, and Medicare almost can't be avoided there. What do you say to people that are worried about Medicaid in Arizona, access in Arizona?
Well, they should be worried. Look, the bill that they passed said that the E&C committee has to cut $880 billion from their committee. The only way that you do that is for Medicare and Medicaid. I'm hoping they're smart enough to not touch Medicare, because that is the third rail of politics. But also, Medicaid now is also, in my opinion, too. I've been traveling the state, specifically actually having town halls in rural Arizona, in what people would call red Arizona. And rural Arizona is more dependent on Medicaid than urban Arizona, than Maricopa County and Pima County. 30% of the residents of rural Arizona are on Medicaid. The hospital systems are entirely dependent on Medicaid expansion. So when they go and they cut those $880 billion, you're directly affecting some of the poorest of this country and of this state. You will shut down rural hospitals, and all in the cause of just giving a bigger tax cut to this uber rich of this country.
Is that message getting through to red Arizona?
I actually do think it is getting through, whether it was in Douglas or it's been in Sierra Vista or it's been in northern Arizona that I've been talking to. We've heard of Republicans that are very concerned. You start seeing the polling where Republicans are polled and saying that they do not want to see Medicaid cuts in exchange for more tax cuts. You're seeing Republicans in the House and the Senate communicating to their leadership that they don't want to see massive tax cuts on the backs of Medicaid cuts. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean they won't try to do any backdoor cuts to Medicaid, which will still affect hundreds of thousands of Arizonans. But at a minimum, at least, you could see that they have a fear that if they go after Medicaid, that there will be political consequences to them.
And yet the Trump administration, the president himself said, Medicare, Medicaid, not on the chopping block. Don't worry about it, they say. Should we be worried about it?
Well, yes, if he's saying that, absolutely, because the one consistency about Donald Trump is his inconsistency. So we have to make sure that we are doing everything we can to get the message out that this is a real humanitarian crisis, that you will be kicking off hundreds of thousands of Arizonans, hospitals will be shutting down, people are losing their jobs. All these things are going to happen. And more importantly, Ted, this is an option. An option. The president and the Republicans can extend the tax cuts further without cutting Medicaid. Now, you'll have to give up giving the top earners a tax cut, but you could still contain the middle-class tax cuts, as well as even hold to where the corporate tax cuts are now. But you can't do that if you want to go further and deeper in giving tax cuts to the ultra-rich. The only way they do that is by going after Medicaid.
Speaking of the ultra-rich and speaking of those connected, you want an ethics probe into possible insider trading on Wall Street, especially with the volatility of what we have been seeing of late. What's that all about?
Well, it's very simple. The elites of this country, sometimes you could see that they are getting inside information, or seem like they're trading on inside information. And leading up to the tariff pause that the president announced, only a few minutes before he announced it, there was a huge spike in buys of stocks, specifically stocks would benefit from a pause on tariffs. Clearly, somebody knew something was happening, and they were able to take advantage of that situation and actually told other friends. Now, I'm not saying the president did it on purpose either, but I do think that just looking at the data, it does demand that we have an investigation, because it's not fair to the American consumer and your everyday stockholder if they have to compete against people that have insider information. And this is why it's also important that we in the Senate, which I've always been an advocate of, even in the House, we need to also pass legislation that stops members of Congress from buying individual stocks and trading individual stocks, knowingly with a lot of the information that we have.
Okay, you want an investigation. There's smoke over there, but is there fire? Is there evidence of insider trading?
Well, the data shows that there was such an abnormal spike in trading right before the announcement happens that there's definitely enough smoke. Now, I don't want to go and say that this is something that someone needs to be prosecuted for it, but clearly, if this had been done in any other markets, if this had been done among insiders of the New York Stock Exchange, there would be an investigation. So there should be an investigation to see what happened here, if anything was involved, and then after that, proceed accordingly. And if there's nothing there and there just happens to be a glitch, then fine. But there's no way that the abnormal amount of trades that happened minutes before the announcement, it should not go uninvestigated.
Are you confident in the SEC to do such an investigation, considering downsizing and everything else that's going on with agencies back in Washington?
It's not necessarily that I'm confident, but I do believe that some of this data, when exposed, does not necessarily need a deep investigation. It's fairly straightforward. And these are regulated markets that have pretty good tracing. So we know when things are bought, how often they're bought, and at that point we could also trace who received information. So, and lastly, I think the American public will actually end up making that determination at the end of the day. But at least having that information public will allow us to actually understand what actually happened minutes before this announcement.
I know you've commented on this as well. VA employees, mass layoffs, plans for maybe 80,000, more cuts to the VA, likely inevitable. I know you're against that kind of thing. What can you do about it?
Well, a couple of things like within my power. For example, I'm holding all VA political appointees hostage, essentially, until we get a real plan from this VA administrator that shows us where these cuts are, and you have to prove that these cuts are not going to affect services. It's in my opinion, not just as a congressman, as a senator, but someone who actually has used the VA. As a young man, when I returned from the Iraq War, the VA fixed this knee. It's all titanium, good old American product right there. I've used them for my PTSD services and other medical services. I have friends that still use it to this day. For the longest time, we've been complaining about the lack of staffing at the VA, the need to actually recruit some of the best and top specialists and doctors. Doing this is only going to turn that clock backwards. It's going to make it harder for us to actually recruit people going into the future. And right now, we have enrollment dropping in the VA, largely because we have men and women that served in the World War II and the Korean War that are now dying. But because a lot of us younger veterans are starting to get older, you're going to see the enrollment increase in the VA. And if we don't have the staff to match the demand, you're going to have wait times. You're going to have people not being able to get the surgeries they need, the services that they want. We're hearing already of horrible situations where men and women have to do their PTSD therapy in open air cubicles, which is awful to do, all because this administration is more hell-bent on these cuts, but not necessarily on figuring out how to make good quality improvements because they're just obsessed with a 15% cut that doesn't actually make any sense numerically to the services that are needed. And
I would ask again how that information gets out there, but we're kind of running short on time a little bit. And I do want to ask you about the Democratic Party. There's a feeling that the party is still reeling after this last election, that the party was abandoned by the working class. You did a very prominent interview in the New York Times a couple of months ago, basically saying that the party seemed like it was on this rail and the American public was on this rail. What's going on out there as far as the party is concerned, especially in light with what's happening with Republicans and at the White House?
Well, look, there's no denying that we had a total mismatch in terms of message and policy and the voter and the working class voter. I think now we have a perfect opportunity. I think the American public gave an opportunity to this administration, and they're seeing in a horrible manner quite quickly that what was offered and what was promised is not actually going to occur. We're seeing right now inflation is higher. The economic forecast shows a recession is coming. Interest rates are not getting any lower. And so the promise of where President Trump had promised that he was going to change it all is not there. And so what he did in the first really 100 days is he focused on the richest of the rich and at the same time cutting the poorest of the poor when it comes to Medicaid. That is unpopular with the working class of this country. And this is where the Democratic Party has to really shine. We have to show that we're willing to fight for Main Street, fight for the working class, protect Medicaid, protect veterans, especially when these cuts are all designed just to find more money to give a tax cut to the richest of the rich. That's how we win.
And again, that question, I think you've answered this to some extent, but again, the idea of a promise among Democrats, more than we're not him, we're not them. Is that promise there, and is that promise connecting, or is there still a disconnect with much of America?
I think there is still a disconnect because we're still not prominently within the election season. But showing, number one, that our fight is their fight, showing that we're willing to throw down the gauntlet to protect Medicaid, Social Security, Medicare, to fight for Main Street, to make sure that they are going to survive the volatility of these crazy tariff wars, to make sure that people are going to have real wage growth and be able to have buying power. That's how we win this. Now, when we start getting into the next year, we have to put together a real policy agenda, which I think is going to be incumbent, that is a strong statement that says that Americans can have a bright future in this country. They're going to be able to buy a home, start a business, have secure retirement, and have a secure neighborhood. When we put that out there, that's how we're going to be win. If we try to have an amorphous anti-Trump message, we are going to lose, because that message, the Trump message, is always stronger than the nebulous anti-Trump message.
Interesting. And real quickly, you talked in the New York Times interview and in other interviews as well about Latinos and males especially, and the goals, the dreams therein.
Yeah.
That Democratic promise that you just talked about, does that resonate with that cohort?
It does, but we have to make sure that we back it up with real words and real policies, right? And when we don't do that, that's when we start losing votes. Look, if you've already seen this, the opinion of Latino voters of the president has turned. There's just a Pew poll that just came out where the president's numbers are so underwater. He's only around 28% favorability with Latinos. And that's because Latinos look at what he's done and you disagree with him in two fronts. Number one, the fact that he hasn't done anything in terms of changing the economy, specifically the ability for them to be able to buy and attain the American dream. And number two, his overshooting when it comes to immigration policies.
All right. Senator Ruben Guyg, I could talk to you all afternoon.
Thank you.
It's good to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.